I could have never imagined myself listening to Billy Joel's Vienna and cry, but I did multiple times. Hello, welcome back to my channel. I post this video on my birthday, so if you're watching this, I am officially turning 31. I would say so far I enjoy being in my 30s way more than in my 20s. I found my inner peace, sort of, and I have gotten a taste of life, sort of. Most importantly, I'm much happier than I was before. So today we are discussing two books that popped into my head. The second, I decided to do a video about turning 31. We will start with two books and talk a little bit about me crying over a song later. If you're only in for the books, please click the timestamps. These two books, I would say, have surprising similarities in terms of the authors and the themes. And these two books have largely shaped my view about classical fiction. The first one is Madame Bovary by French author Gustav Flaubert. And the reason I put up this shirt today, so this is a quote from the novel saying she wants to die and go to Paris. I think it's an amazingly accurate quote that can be used to summarize a lot of people's ultimate eternal dilemma towards life. So it would be appropriate to wear for this video. In case you have heard about the book but have never read it, Madame Bovary is about a woman named Emma who married a doctor who is also yearning for luxury lifestyle, love and attention. When she finds out how dull and lame and disappointing her marriage life was, she became infatuated by a law student who shared her passion about literature and art. Their affairs escalated her irrational indulgence of luxury and eventually led to a bankruptcy. Hence, Emma swallowed poison to end her own life. Allegedly, the story was inspired by a real friend of the author, Flaubert. Henry James commented that the novel is a perfect work of fiction because of how enriching the plot was and how each character had their own thinking. I learned something about Flaubert when I was learning French, saying he was known for an ability to pick the absolute perfect word for each sentence and description. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I like this book because it showed the gap between a person's desire, illusion of being loved, and the cold-blooded reality. I heard a rumor in Chinese internet that the book was described as a must-read for anyone who was about to go to register marriage. And it's a nice way to put it, and I absolutely agree with it. Emma was longing for something that she could never had, and she spent her life chasing a ghost. She never knew what she truly wanted or who she was, and she could never have found out because of the society that she was living in wouldn't allow women to take that venture. I understand there are plenty of comparison between Emma and Anna Karenina, which I do believe it's an interesting topic about women's infidelity and how the society punished them for it. I would say Madame Bovary is relatively easier to read compared to Anna Karenina because first it's shorter and everyone's name was easier to remember. But Flaubert wrote in a poetic yet sharp way. I especially like the ending, where he just cut it all out, pointing out everyone's fate after Emma's death. It also reminded me of the ending from The Red and the Black, same cruel way into pointing out that nothing mattered at the end and everybody kind of died. I began to think now that maybe it's a French thing, I don't know. And if someone has an answer, please tell me. In terms of my thought on the book itself, it creeps me out that Emma could never have figured out the ultimate truth about herself and her life. She was falling in love with love itself because an ordinary marriage is never enough and will never be enough. The plot of this story also fits what I was constantly thinking about. As a woman, to what extent can we go to find out about our own identity and to chase what we love or what we think are the most important things in life? What is the truth of marriage? Or what is the truth that we were pushed or not pushed or seduced to the fancy life that everybody thought beautiful women should have? I also hold a little bit suspicious about committed relationship long before I started to read this novel, because for all the times I have been in those, I always find out the ugly side of humanity, both in myself and in my partners. Was I really in love, or was I just bored? Did I love them, or was I just practicing what everybody else was doing? Was the fancy life truly what I desired? Do I work hard and push myself to get a fancy bag? Madame Bovary pointed out a kind of truth that it was a little bit hard to accept as a reader, especially as a female reader, because let's be frank, Emma did something wrong. So did Anna Karenina. They did something wrong. They made mistakes. But the society more or less pushed them towards a very deep hole that it's impossible for them to climb back out alive. It was incredibly sharp in terms of pointing out how people deal with normal, dull, boring life. It was like a wake-up call for me when I read it. I think I read it when I was 20-something. It made me scared of all the deep holes that we could have fallen into if we don't have a clear and sharp mind. Which brings me to the next book we're talking about today, Mrs. Craddock by my favorite author, Somerset Maugham. The story is about a wealthy girl named Bertha who married beneath her social class. So she married a steward named Edward. She was hoping that she could gain a happy, emotional, fulfilling marriage because her husband is tall, strong, and very handsome. But he turned out to be unimaginative, never properly educated, and he just didn't care. He didn't care if they connected. He didn't care that he doesn't read books, but she loves reading. Bertha realized that Edward loved his cows more than a living person, that he lives only in the life of his own. So naturally, Bertha later realized that she was living an excruciating life. She described her husband as utterly brainless and bores me to death. She wanted to develop an affair with a younger man, but eventually stopped. After the young man left, she realized it was pure infatuation and nothing more. Her husband eventually died from a riding accident, and Bertha, for the first time since her wedding, felt free, and later destroyed all Edward's photographs and letters. I'm not sure it can get more anti-marriage than this. Maybe Mrs. Craddock is not as famous as Madame Bovary, but somehow I like this book even better. It tells the fundamental conflict in a marriage, where one person wants emotional thrilling, but the other just wants to spend all 24 hours unbothered, in peace. Women were punished in both stories for wanting more and not settling for what they already had. Mrs. Craddock is way luckier than Emma because, one, she had money, and she came out of her dull marriage alive. By a painful way, of course, but she survived. And I especially loved the way Mom plotted this story, that she wanted to have an affair, but it didn't happen, and how she felt peacefully joyfulness when witnessing her husband's body being carried outside the house. Mom had a special cold satire tone when discussing love and relationship, and as an Aquarius also, I highly appreciate the tone and the satire. He wrote in his memoir that sometimes he identified himself as the smart aunt of Bertha, who had never got married her whole life, but had also seen through every lies and secrets beneath a relationship. Considering both Mom and Flaubert had allegedly developed personal relationships with both genders, I would say both two books provided very insightful thoughts about human beings, how we connect, and how impossible it could be to communicate with others and make peace with ourselves. In terms of style, Madame Bovary is formal, serious, and of course tragic. Mrs. Craddock is lighter in terms of style and story, with more satire and banter. It won't shake your believing system, but the nihilist in my head felt called out after reading this. You could say both stories discussed how difficult it was for women to stand in a society that thought they could do nothing but to marry and to stay in a family. Is it all what this is though? I still think about that even till today, till this present life. Is it still incredibly hard to tell what you want in life? And how are you going to get it? Is it a delusion that I have, and for me only, thinking you could live a dreamy life where you don't feel stuck or bored or dull, that you would find emotional fulfillment within yourself and others, that you will not settle down for anything less? Is it just me or whatever, whoever we are chasing? We could never have get what we wanted. As for myself, like I said before, I love being in 30s much more than in 20s. Because after a few years of chaotic love and digging around in life, discovering myself, I have finally started to learn to accept myself and face what I love and what I don't. Though sometimes I still feel the burden of being a woman, as more people are asking me, why are you single? I mean, can people just understand the truth that there are things more important than marriage, that a woman should be allowed to have enormous ambitions in her life? Or can I take my own peace diving into the sea of life? Do I have to apologize for wanting so many things? I think at this level, I can absolutely resonate with Emma, who wanted a fancy life, who wanted something she cannot have, who wanted all the attentions and love, because sometimes it felt like it would never be enough. I can absolutely understand the hunger. That's probably why the other night I was listening to Vienna by Billy Joel and cried about you can get what you want or you can just get old, and only fools are satisfied. Sometimes I do ask myself, are Vienna and Paris truly waiting for me? Will I ever get there? I don't know, and I don't know where to find out. And that's all for today's video. It's Chinese New Year, so I'm traveling back home, doing nothing but eating snacks and reading books. Currently, I'm reading Virginia Woolf and planning to read maybe a short story collection from Nabokov. We'll discuss it later. By the way, I recently finished Disney Hulu show Rivals and I read the original book. Talk about bonkbuster. It was great. It was the best show I have watched this year. Although the sex scene was, I would appreciate a little bit tips forward, because sometimes I want to eat, but when I click on the show, I saw a giant thing on screen in the first episode, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I love the show. I love the story. I will read the whole Rival collection and we'll discuss it later. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy birthday to me. I hope, think about my most genuine hope, wish for everyone is, I hope we all find what we are looking for. See you next week. Bye-bye.
When will you realize Vienna waits for you?